Hello and welcome to Hexed Encountered. My name is Joe. Today I'm going to be continuing my series on setting up a fictional historical league in OOTP 24. The previous two I talked about basic setup and kind of the outline of what the league would look like, etc., etc. And the second one I started to talk about how we edit players and showed some of the various things that you can do with that. And in this one I wanted to kind of talk about setting up teams and also talk about the world data, the XML file, things like that you can use to kind of modify the way the world is set up. That is a little bit advanced for many, I'm assuming. But I'll show you how I do it, kind of, and then you can kind of draw your own conclusions and decide if maybe you want to try taking this on. Because it is a lot, and it's the reason why it's been about a week since I've actually put up a video of this, because I've been working on something with the world XML file to kind of customize this to fit more of the 1870s aesthetic that I'm going for here. So we're going to load up our league here. It's Mythic League Baseball. This is a brand new league. I'm just starting it. The plan is to have do a 19th century solo playthrough, essentially build history, get to 1901 and turn it into an online league. That's my personal plan. This is a real Major League Baseball. Essentially, we're starting with the National Association, which predates MLB's National League by 5 years. So there will be 5 NA seasons. Then we get to 1876. The National League will start. We will bring in the American Association, the Union Association, the Players League, et cetera, et cetera. I may even bring in some of the minor leagues, like the International League that started in the 19th century, maybe eventually the Pacific Coast League, which began in the 20th century, but very early. Things like that. The Eastern League. The Eastern League actually became the International League, but general things like that. Southern Association. All these leagues. Many of the more famous minor leagues began either in the late 19th century rather, or the early 20th century. So I may include those, even though they're not specifically built into OOTP. OOTP's minor league database, I believe, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, because I haven't looked in a bit here, but I believe it starts around 1915, and it's very spotty because it relies on data from, like online sources and things. And that's somewhat incomplete still. As time goes on, it gets filled in more and more and more. But for now, it's fairly, I won't say it's sketchy or thin, because it's not. There's a lot there, but it's not complete. So enough about that. So you might notice here, if you're looking pretty closely, that we have a logo for our NA. And I changed this from MLB to NA because what I'm going to do is when I get to 1876, I will deactivate the National Association and begin Major League Baseball with the National League. And I may even just go National League at first. I'm kind of on the fence about that. I'll probably play that by ear, only because the American Association comes in a few years later, and then we have 2 competing leagues, and, well, you get the gist. So we have the NA here, and I pulled this and all the other logos you're going to see, the logos and the jerseys and the hats and the pants, all this stuff I got from No Pepper on the OOTP boards. If you're not familiar with his work, he does a lot of historical stuff. He has a great set of 19th century uniforms and logos, etc. They are available on the OOTP forum. So you can go to Out of the Park Development's website and go to the community and find the forum. If you don't have an account, you should get one. It's a great source for all kinds of information. It goes back many, many years now. I think I've been on there for 20 plus years, although there was a reboot somewhere in there in the early 2000s. Where the old one went away and they rebooted it with a new one, but the new one's still going strong, and I think it goes back to like 2003 or 4 or something like that. So anyway, again, I digress. We have our NA logo here. If you're not familiar with how you set that up, here in see if I can remember how you set this up. I think it's right here. Edit league colors and logo. So you come in here, you can set your colors and this is the logo. And you can do auto load, where it will look for one in your saved game folder and in the global folder. And then it will load a default one, which basically means it creates one for you. Some things are in here and they actually look okay. Some things they just kind of make like a diamond or a baseball, and they stick a letter on there, like an N or something. You can also generate random, etc. And you can also load a secondary logo. If you do not do that, it just uses this for both. So if we did want to change it, you can click this and you can select basically your web color, right? So, and you can actually, if I remember correctly, you can kind of click. Yeah, you can click on the colors in here and draw them like that. So you can actually draw it that way. And so if we wanted this, if we wanted, say, blue and red, you can just do that and hit OK. Now we have blue and red. So you get the gist. Pretty straightforward. Then we have the team. So if we go to the team home screen here, this is the Boston Red Stockings. Excuse me. Now, in the first video, I got a comment, and the comment was something along the lines of, why didn't you include the Cincinnati Red Stockings? This is terrible, etc., etc. The Boston Red Stockings are the Cincinnati Red Stockings. So if that person whose name I can't remember right now is watching this, this is that team. They moved, basically, but this is the Cincinnati Red Stockings. This is the continuation of that franchise. And if you don't believe me, look it up on the web. So anyway, you can go here. Once you're on here, you hit the settings, and now we have all our information. So what I did was I went in and I changed the abbreviations to match kind of what's in the historical database. So what OOTP itself will give you if you just do an out-of-the-box 1871 league. It will generate the 9 teams. It's going to set them up in like an NL-AL thing, which is why I don't like to use it that way. But you get all the teams anyway, right? It also puts everybody as a free agent, so you don't have, the correct rosters. You can fix that, but it involves a little bit of extra work, and I'm not going to get into that because I'm not playing with real players. So we have our city is set, right? I don't use regions typically, but you could if you wanted to. You can also have a team draft region. So if you wanted your Boston team to only be able to draft from, say, Massachusetts, very easy to find. You come in here and go to U.S. state, and then you pick Massachusetts, and that's how you would do that. I am not doing that, but that's how you do it. You can add a background picture if you want to. Interesting or useful things to know is your internal IDs, because when you look at these in some of the exports, you'll know that Team 7 is Boston. Ideally, I would prefer Boston to be Team 1 and Chicago to be Team 2, because they're the two that actually, even though the game isn't going to see it this way, they're the two that are actually still around. This is the Atlanta Braves, and the Chicago team is the Cubs. They're still around. So I would have preferred that to be 1 and 2. Another thing I did was I went in and I changed the names of the owners so that they're a little bit more era appropriate. And you can click your owner profile, and here he is, and he's young. And I kind of based them a little bit on the actual owner of the team. See, this was the big difference with the NA versus what came before it, is that these were now run as businesses, even though it was pretty loose, which is what ended up dooming this league. It was pretty loose rules-wise with the franchises, but previously they were basically conglomerations of players who joined together in amateur clubs and played baseball, right? And then eventually people realized, hey, I can make money, so they became professional. And the first professional team, as most people know, was the Cincinnati Red Stockings, and again, that team became this team. So what we're looking at right here is a continuation of that first professional team from 1869. They just moved it from Cincinnati to Boston. Harry Wright was kind of the central figure in that. And I don't want to go too deep into real history. This is just for people who might be interested in why and how this is set up this way. Now let's talk ballpark. We have the South End Grounds, which is their actual ballpark. So what I wanted to do is here in our Out of the Park Developments OOTP Baseball Data database folder. Now, yours might be something, is likely to be, if you're on Windows, like I am, it will likely, instead of this being the Data 1G drive, which is what I use for my leagues, you might have it in C, Program Files x86, Out of the Park Developments, OOTP Baseball, etc., or it could be in your documents, depending on how you've installed it. So anyway, this is all the files that kind of populate all the information when you start a league, or you add teams or leagues or whatever once the league is begun. All of this stuff affects it, right? So we have ballparks and fielding and modifiers and stats. And you look at all this, it's like, well, what is all this stuff? We have an injury file, and I'll talk about that probably a little bit down the road, and maybe, a few more videos from now. Somewhere in the next few videos, I'll talk about injuries and storylines and things like that. But for now, let's just talk about ballparks. So here in our ballpark text file, and I'll bring this over. This is just a comma delimited file. I'm going to stretch it way out so we get it on one line. Now it's on my other screen as well, and go away. So you can see here we have the year. This isn't really sorted all that well. It's in alphabetical order. So the first one is the Union Association's Altoona Mountain City Club, who played in Columbia Park. And so when you look at this, it's like, well, it's a wall of text. How do I figure any of this out, right? So what you can do is, here's what I would do. If I was going to edit this, I would copy it, and then I would paste it. I always forget which one is paste. I'll just use Control V. So we'll just do this. Right, so now we have a copy of this. So I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to change this to be .csv. It'll give you a warning. Now, if I click this, it's going to open it in an Excel. Okay, if you have Excel. If you don't have Excel, you can use OpenOffice. You can put it in Google Sheets. There's options, right? So now it's in a spreadsheet, and you can see what all the columns are, and you can kind of stretch it out. You can see the cities. You can see the names of the parks. With Excel, you can even do like a filter. So if you went to the year and you go to data filter, you can then select 1871. And now these are the teams that are in my league, and these are their ballparks. Right now, all the attendances here are 0, so you don't really need to worry about that. The park factors are very basic. There isn't a whole lot of play-by-play information about games from 1871. So it's very basic. Basically, doubles and triples are 1 for everybody. Batting average and home runs are the same, and it's based, I think, on the level of hits in each location, essentially. So you're not going to get a ton, and most of the capacities kind of default to 10,000. The ones they have a little more info on, they actually have. Like, apparently the Olympic grounds in Washington were tiny. The capacity is 500, and several teams played there. The Olympics eventually will fold. Another Washington team will start up. They'll play in the same tiny ballpark. So luckily for us, finances aren't really a big issue this early. There's no free agent. This even predates reserve clause, and we'll get into that as well down the road. We'll talk about reserve clause and all that stuff. So, if you follow along with this, you'll get kind of a history lesson on how baseball actually worked in the 19th century, as well as watching me go through the league. I plan on doing yearly updates once the league is up and running, maybe even monthly updates. Depends on how the audience reaction to all this is, and talk about things that are going on with the game, because I want to track that in my league as well. So when the reserve clause comes into effect, when the American Association comes in, when the Union Association comes in, when they have the players revolt and create their own league, and the reaction of the magnates, the guys who owned the clubs in the National League, which was the 800-pound gorilla in the baseball world at the time, and how those guys reacted to it and basically squashed the players and put them in their place, so to speak, for the next 80 years until the Kurt Flood thing came along, and they ended up getting finally free agency in baseball. So, again, getting off track. I'm sorry, I digress a lot. I apologize. That's just kind of the nature of how my brain works, I think. Anyway, here are our teams. So what I did was I went in and I put their real life ballpark in, because I want the real life ballparks. So again, because I'm playing outside the box, like, the game will give you this if you play a historical league. But what it's going to do is it's going to divide them up into a National League and an American League, because the game isn't really set up to handle the changes in the leagues themselves. Like this league, the NA, went away after 1875. 1876, the National League started, but the American League didn't start as a major league until 1901. And before that, it started life as the Western League, and it was a minor league. And then it changed its name to American League in 1900, but didn't go, quote unquote, major league until the following year. And we'll talk about that too, but that's obviously down the road. Anyway, so I set this up. I put South End grounds. I put the factors in. I changed, as I mentioned, I changed the names so that these match. It's actually these two here. So that these match what's in the historical database. This way, when, down the road, maybe we play until it's like 1960 or something, right? And I've got 90 years of history here to go through. All my teams and leagues will look just like they would if you looked at Baseball Reference or you looked at a regular default built-in OOTP historical league. I want them to match up. The thing that's going to be different will be owners, staff, and players. We'll have our own Babe Ruth probably, maybe. We'll see. He's kind of a big outlier, so we might not get somebody who equates exactly to him. But we'll have people like that, I'm still undecided about the whole color line thing. But if we elect to do that, we'll have our own Jackie Robinson, and we'll have our own Negro Leagues, and we'll have our own Satchel Paige, and all those guys. Not direct equivalents to those guys, but guys that you could look at and say, hey, he's kind of like the Mythic League version of so-and-so, right? That's the idea anyway. So let's go back to in here, right? So here you see, here's South End grounds, here's the factors, right? So you can see that doubles and triples are 1. Average for left and right are both 1.031, as are home runs left and right, 1.031. I matched the wall data, height and distance. If we go into the edit ballpark, this is where you fill all that out in here. You can even put the latitude and longitude and look it up on Google Earth if you want to. I've done that in the past. I'm not doing it now because it's like of marginal use. It's kind of neat because you can click on it and it'll open up Google Earth and show you where the ballpark was and everything, which is kind of cool. But that involves extra research that I didn't really feel like doing. You want the weather tab. Now, most of the time it's going to be right. It was right here because it knows Boston. The ones it has trouble with are like, I think it had trouble with Rockford maybe, or Troy, one of the smaller cities where there's multiple cities with that name. Like there is more than one Boston in the United States, but when you put Boston in OOTP, it's gonna kind of default to thinking, oh, he must mean Massachusetts and not Boston. I don't know, some other state that has a Boston in it, because I know there's more than one. And then you would just drag down here and find the appropriate location. So here's Boston, Massachusetts. You click it, it updates that. Like if we just wanted Fairbanks weather, we can click that and you can see it's going to be pretty dang cold most of the time. And then you just go back to Massachusetts, find Boston, click that, and it reverts back. That's it. It'll even pull in your wind speed and average direction. So it uses, the game has its own weather database with all this information in it. The amount of stuff that this game takes into account is really, really impressive. So that's basically how you do that. There are 3D models. I'm not going to get into that because I'm not really the kind of person that can make those. I mean, I probably could, but it would take a lot of time that I don't really have. So I'm not doing that. But you can. And there are downloadable models of a lot of the 20th century ballparks. So if you want to play in Baker Bowl, you can pull in Baker Bowl or Polo Grounds or Ebbets Field or Old Wrigley, Old Yankee, Fenway Park in the 1920s, whatever. There are tons of guys, or I should say people, because they could be women too, I don't know, who do this kind of stuff and churn out the content for the game. The community for OOTP is tremendous. So anyway, I went through and I did that for all of the teams. Right? Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was population, and I don't know if I'm going to actually get into it during this video because it's getting somewhat long. But the population of the United States, as you know right now, is probably approximately somewhere in the 320 to 350 million mark, right? In 1870, the population of the United States was in the 35 million ballpark. So we're talking about like 10% of what it is today. Most of the population lived east of the Mississippi. That's still kind of true now, but we're it's much more even, and there are obviously a lot of people in California and along the West Coast and so on and so forth. But if you were to, let me go to the Explore World here, and I'll show you what I mean. So if I scroll down to, and this is a work in progress, it is not done. Let me just add that caveat right up front. So we go to the United States. Now you can see the estimated population is 80 million. How did it get to 80? It should be 300, right? Well, because I've been editing it. Look at the largest cities. New York, 942, 292. That's New York's population as of the 1870 census. This is Philadelphia's. Now, Charlotte, I didn't get to North Carolina yet, so Charlotte's way too big. Charlotte's population in 1870 is probably tiny. One of the things I did to kind of find that out is if we come in here, I've been using ChatGPT to find population of places, right? So if we scroll up here, it's kind of funny. So let's see where, here, wait, well, that's North Carolina. So yeah, if we look at North Carolina, just for fun, see if we can find Charlotte. Charlotte's population was 7,094. Okay. It's now almost 600,000. So that tells you exactly. The biggest city in North Carolina in 1870 had 14,000 people in it. The biggest city. So that just tells you exactly what I'm talking about. Las Vegas didn't even exist. It was probably like a tiny little depot or something, maybe. But that's the gist. And I'm using ChatGPT, and you can see I ask it, and it gives me a bunch of stuff, right? The funny thing is, though, and I wanted to show you this if I can find one. Yeah, see here I have list the next 25 most populated places in Wisconsin, and it tells me it doesn't have it. Then I tell it, you do have it, and it's like, oh, apologies, and here they are. So you kind of have to fight with it a little bit, and I don't know if you have if you're using this or not. And some of the data is wonky. I will tell you that right up front. It even admits it, that some of the data is wrong. I've done some where you get the same city over and over again because it's losing its, computerized mind or whatever. But in general, if you structure things and you have to play around with it to find the right query, if you play around and find the right query, it'll give you great information. The problem is you're not always going to figure out the right query. So what I typically do if I can find it, and I don't know why it's not here, but I usually start with something like list the 25 most populated places in X state in 1870. And it'll say, I don't have that. And then you say, you do have the 1870 census data. And then it'll say, yes, I do. And it'll give you the numbers. And then I'll say, give me 25, the 26 through 50, and it'll do it. And 51 through 75, and it'll do it. So that's kind of how you have to trick it into doing this. And I don't know why I'm missing the first 25. They're in here somewhere. Oh, here's the first 25. Okay. Because here, exactly. I asked it for the top 25 or whatever, and it gave me 26 through 50. And then I said, well, what about the top 25? That was 26 through 50. And it says, oh, apologies. And it gives me 1 through 25. Milwaukee had 71,000. That was the biggest city in Wisconsin. And then it goes down through 25. And then you get, obviously, I had 26 through 50 here and 51 through 75 here. I took all these numbers. I wrote a spreadsheet. I'm not going to show it to you because it's not really worth the time invested. And I use that to update the file that has, and let me show you that. Actually, it is in here. So if we go here to world default, the one that's updated most recently, that would be this one. Now, if we open this up, so here, that's Nevada. So that one's not done. Nevada would be next, okay? This here is Oregon. So Oregon is the one I did most recently. So here's Albany, Oregon has 1528. If I didn't find the city in the top 100 or 125 or wherever, I decided to stop because the population of Oregon in 1870 was 90,000 people. There weren't a lot of people in Oregon. Okay. So A lot of these cities will be ones because they either didn't exist or they were so tiny that they didn't register in the census. And the way if you go to the U.S. Census site and look at 1870 data, you can see why it's a little tough to read. Things were called differently. The organization of the townships and villages and so forth is different than it is now. It's kind of a mess. That's why I let ChatGPT do all that thinking for me. And even if it's off a little bit, it's going to be close enough for me, right? Close enough for government work, as they say. So if you wanted to look at, say, Portland, which we know is, a fairly large city, Portland at that time didn't even exist. So there you go. Or it probably did, but it was like 50 people or something. Anyway, so that's Oregon as of 1870. And then above that we have, this is Colorado. So, Boulder, I know Boulder's right here, 2,600 people. Denver had 4,759. So that's what I've been doing, and I will continue to do that, and I will return with another update at some point soon. But for now, I'm going to sign this off. I just kind of wanted to give you an update on what's going on and show you what I'm doing. So for now, that's going to do it. Please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, all that good stuff I always ask for at the end of the videos. Much appreciate. I do definitely appreciate your support, I should say. But yeah, I'm Joe. This is the sports edition of the Hexed Encountered channel. And until next time, happy gaming.